This is where our story begins. The ghetto, Lower East Side, New York City. A sealed-off world of its own, complete with strange sounds, stifling smells. Its own look of standing still in time. The most amazing thing about a ghetto is that people live here. People who have the capacity for happiness, hope, but who instead live in limbo, slowly going nowhere, cocooned in a world of despair. A world that seems to refuse any penetration of progress. The ghetto is their home. Their America, the home of the free. A few years ago, this neighborhood was home territory for the street gangs of New York. Names like the Bishops, Hellburners, Scorpions were dreaded symbols of terror. They ruled with sawed-off shotguns, bicycle chains, zip guns, Molotov cocktails, the switchblade. Out of this culture comes the man whose story we're about to relive. The weird excitement of cruelty was his life. The fear of death, his constant companion. A few years ago, he was the leader of the most notorious street gang in New York City, the Mau Mau Chapter. This is his turf, his people. This is the story of Nicky Cruz. No need to hide.
Hi, Nicky.
With host, Art Linkletter.
Right on the dot.
Nice to see you, Art.
I'm looking forward to this adventure, Nicky.
Welcome to the Mama Curve, baby.
Nicky was 15 when he arrived in New York from his native Puerto Rico. A home of parental rejection and witchcraft had sown such hate in Nicky's heart that his parents, in desperation, sent him to live with his brother Frank. To a frightened, lonely boy, these were Nicky's first sights of glamorous New York. It took only the first day at school to tell him what kind of world he had entered.
In the middle of the richest city in the world, Nicky, this is a kid's playground?
Yes, it is. That's the way it is here.
Dirty?
Filthy and...
This is the playground where you, as a little kid, had your first fist fight from Puerto Rico. You thought you should fight fair, didn't you?
Yes, when I came over here, I thought that was the best way because I never knew the way that the people live here in the city. So I thought that a fair fight was the best way.
But what had happened to you after you tried to fight fair?
That was a dirty fight. They really beat me up and...
Was that the time when you first decided, Nicky, that you couldn't live and you couldn't fight fair and exist here?
That was a change in me because really I remember that when I saw this happen, then I began to develop my own philosophy. I began to understand this. I began to believe that you have to kill if you have to, burn if you have to, don't let nobody push you around. I knew I'm not going to live that long because of the environment. So life turned to be something that it didn't have no meaning.
Of course, Nicky, I can understand how you would have learned to have been a fighter. Coming from Puerto Rico as you did, living in a family where you had 17 brothers and one sister, you had to fight for your life to live in your own family almost, didn't you?
Yes, that was a large family. I believe that it was tough for my mother to take care of 19 children.
19 children. And your father and mother were both spiritualists. They were the kind of people who worked on the superstitious ignorance of the Puerto Ricans, voodoo and all that?
Exactly, yes. My father was a doctor of witchcraft, and he used to talk to the people in the island about this philosophy.
Now, of course, at that time, you were just a little kid, and you were baffled by the fact that your mother said that Satan was your father.
It hurt me so much when my mother rejected me, because I began to wonder where I'm going to go, because no longer she was my mother. She was my flesh and blood mother, that's all. And when I began to realize, I began to know that I had to live my own life the best I could.
So everything in your life was rejection. Rejection at home in Puerto Rico. When you came here to this new world, you were rejected by the kids.
Exactly.
And so the thing you started to do was to fight back with everything you had.
But they can push you so fast or so much until you have to react. And I was rejected too much until I had to do my own thing. I had to push people back and do whatever I can do.
When Nicky came from Puerto Rico, he was really rough. I remember when he came to live with us, I got to work, and I told him, Nicky, you know this is a different country, so stay out of trouble, stay at home. When I came back from work, my wife told me that he went to the park. That park was in Forsyth and Rivington Street. I don't know what happened down there, but the fact is that he got in a fight. Because of that, he got a black eye. That was the first time that I saw Nicky with a black eye, and was the last time too. From that on, Nicky went fighting back. He was really wild, really tough. I told him that he should go to school, but he said the school wasn't made for him. Even if he was to school, there he had trouble. Nobody can take care of him.
Vaya, dame 2 perros calientes ahí, muchacho.
What'd you order, Nicky?
Frankfurt.
Oh, a couple of hot dogs.
Hot dogs, yeah.
Nicky, when you ran away from your brother Frank here in the East Side, you went to Brooklyn.
Yes, I was right there.
And I know you were living in an abandoned kind of a old beat-up building, but why were the Mau Mau gang interested in you becoming a member?
Well, I was a street fighter. I was a fighter, and that was my way of life, so I was very tough. Gracias.
Did they see you fight?
Oh, yeah, they saw me fight in the street, and that was what I made it.
And then they invited you to become a member?
Yeah, this friend of mine took me to the neighborhood, and I met the president of the gang.
The Mau Mau?
Yes, and then
What neighborhood was this, Nicky?
This was in Washington Park in Brooklyn.
Are they still there, some
Oh,
of them?
yes, oh, yes.
I'd like to meet them.
Oh, you want to see them?
Right now today, 10 years later.
You want to see them now?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go and see them.
Let's pay the man.
All right, hey.
How much is that?
Okay, 30 cents, 30 cents.
30 cents? All right.
Yeah.
Well, Nicky, this is kind of like a class reunion, isn't it? Only instead of being a graduating class, it's some of the Mau Mau's who are still alive. I bet you guys can remember a lot of fellas who aren't around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them in jail, most
Some of them are buried?
died, buried of dope, drugs, you know.
All that kind of stuff. And you, Caesar,
Yeah.
you're wearing a kind of a belt inside your shirt to hold your back up. Why?
They broke it twice. Them days in jitterbugging.
Jitterbugging means what?
Fighting. And, you know, like the gangs.
What'd they break your back with?
With a pipe.
With a pipe?
Yeah. Broke my head, too.
I noticed you got a scar here.
Yeah.
A scar here.
And
What do you
my
got
head,
in?
too.
And on your head, how
I
many
got
stitches?
12 stitches. Altogether, I added up, I got about 30.
What'd they do? Throw you off a building?
Yeah, they put me on the 3rd floor first, and they tore me up, man.
Boy, that's
Beat me
tough.
to death. Lucky to be alive.
You're lucky to be alive too, aren't you?
Yeah, very lucky because I almost got killed away in a prize. So, you know, I almost got killed. And I shot a guy there, and I did 3 years in jail. You know, they gave me 3 years for that. I got busted. They ratted me out, really. They ratted me out because they had a bunch of rats, you know.
Yeah.
And they just, you know, bang, for the cops at me, you know. And right in South Puerto Rico on 14th Street.
Yeah.
I sang around there before. Nicky Cruz, one of the ways. You know, I used to stay there once in a while. And they arrested me right there, you know. And I did 3 years for that.
3 years. How long you done totally?
10.
10 years.
Yeah.
Well, I remember most was that when Nicky says you're going down, either you go down or have an excuse that you're not. And if you don't have a good excuse, you get your ass whipped. And Blackman was the war counselor. He was the president. He was one of the baddest. And if you didn't go down, you better have a good excuse that you were sick, your mother was sick, or nothing, or they'll chop your head off.
What do you mean go down?
Go down means go fighting with the gang. Like if they say you're going down with the mamas, you better go down. If you have a good excuse, you have to have proof. If you're in the hospital, getting messed up or you're not. And I always had a good excuse of going down, because if I didn't, I would get my head chopped off. And Blackman would chop it off for me.
I didn't mean to leave you out of this, Carlos, but you were one of the little kids, because you're only about how old now?
I'm 25.
So you were around 10 or 11 when the Mau Maus.
Yeah, around 11 or 12, something like that.
Well, you couldn't have been in Rumbles at that age, could you?
Well, I was hanging out with them. You know, I was the youngest one in the crowd.
Did you get clobbered like these guys did?
A couple of times.
Hit on the head with pipes and bats and
Almost got
stabbed?
stabbed once.
Yeah. You're still single.
Yeah.
What are you doing now?
I'm working. I was working.
Hey, Nicky, one of the old gang's working. How about that, fellas? Oh, gee, imagine that.
I'm collecting unemployment.
You're ratting out on the gang. You've gone to work.
Nicky had heart, Nicky. He was one of the baddest presidents we had, all the mamas. If he was one of the worstest ones, he used to go ahead of us. We were right behind him. And if he looked back and he didn't see us, he'd be looking for us to chop our heads off.
So
And Blackman, too.
But at the same time, you respected him, didn't you?
Yeah, we better respect him. He was the president.
Yeah,
we had respect him. He treated us nice. After that, we used to go to gigs and do our thing.
There are no gangs of kids around here now like you were 12 years ago. Why?
Not right now.
Why haven't there been other younger ones who got guns and knives and everything?
Because now the situation is down here, now it's drugs.
Right.
You know,
Drugs.
drugs.
And when you're on drugs, you don't feel like hitting and fighting.
Well,
That's going on too, but most of it is muggings and pocketbooks.
Yeah, that's for the drugs.
You said something very interesting there, Blind Man, and that's nodding. You know, a lot of people think when you take drugs, you get very excited. Actually, when you take heroin, you nod. You don't want to fight. You don't want to do anything.
You don't want to bother, you know what I mean?
But you know, the thing that excited me about his book, Run, Baby, Run, was the chapter where you guys grabbed the Coney Island subway and you took charge of it, didn't you? And you said to the motorman, no stops. Straight to Coney Island.
One way ticket.
How many gangs took over Coney Island that day?
There were so many. How many?
Well,
5,000 or 6,000 guys?
The bishops,
4 or 5.
Chaplain.
The chaplains, the bishops.
About 8 of them.
And you took over the whole Coney Island? Good part of it?
all of it. We stopped traffic and everything.
I'd like to go down and see some of those places, like the Coney Island train that you hijacked it. You were the first hijackers. Instead of getting on an airplane and say, take me to Cuba, you got on the Coney Island Express and says, take me to Coney Island. Blindman, when you got onto the subway, what happened? What did the passengers do?
Well, they freeze, you know. They got nervous, you know. They're scared, you know. So because we was making kind of noise and running around, breaking windows. You know, we were in a ball, you know. So then we ran to the conductor, you know, to the guy that does the train, you know what I mean? And we told him, you know, go straight forward, don't stop.
Then we start jumping. The police was waiting for us, so we split different way. And then they have, in those days, you remember Plymouth, they have the horses, you know, and we began to run and they began to follow with the horses, and sometimes the horses kick you and throw you away. And then there was thousands of people. You hardly really can walk there that day. And I do remember that it was tough for the horses, you know, the police horses to get into the crowd.
Well, when we got there, we started breaking the antennas of the cars, running around. The cops and the horses came on the street, you know. we started throwing stuff on them, and bottles, everything we find, we throw at the cops, you know? And then, when I look around, they had around 20 guys marching, you know, on top of the car walk. Then, you know, like me, Nick, and the guys, so, you know, we hid under the car walk until they passed by, and then we came back out. And the cops went after us in the dirt, you know, the sand, and the horses, and we was tracking, you know, it was making it.
I wasn't such a good fighter with my hands, but I always had a shank. A shank is a knife. I always carry a knife with me, and make sure that blind man was with me. Because he was my bodyguard. And if he didn't have it, I always had it. And I couldn't fight like with my hands when it comes to shanking and stamping. That was my bag.
In other words, you didn't go to Coney Island for fun. You went there for a fight.
To raise hell. That was our bag.
And you did it.
That's right. Chop heads, too.
As I listened to Carlos and Blindman, I realized that these were the memories of the good times. Between the takeover at Coney Island and today, they all had served prison terms for various crimes. And right then, at that moment, they were on heroin. The sadistic Coney Island episode was one of their cherished memories. They had few others.
Nicky, we've been talking about the glamorous life of the gang and how you had your rumbles and your fights, how you took over the Coney Island subway, how you came out here and wrecked things up and down the whole beach. And to some, this is going to sound glamorous and exciting, that it's going to be a very fascinating life. But how, Nicky, did you feel all the time really inside?
Rotten, really rotten. I began to understand that I have the terrible feelings that someday I'm going to be killed, just as anybody in the street. I knew that I was young, but yet I feel so terrible and lonely. I was so lonesome many times, and many times I was in my room, and there sometimes this cold sweat used to possess me, and I began to have fear about life. I knew that if I start living more, that it's going to be a hell in this earth. And somehow I preferred to be dead, because there was no excitement. It was nothing but loneliness, despair, insecurity, fear. It was a life which I never recommended to nobody, because I was so rotten inside, because I knew I blew it. I did run. I did everything to hurt people. I hurt myself. There was no future. I blew my mind. I lost my identity. I couldn't understand people no longer. This was something that really bugged me.
So, Nicky, really, the gang fights and the rumbles were an attempt to further escape from yourself, to get away from your lonesomeness.
Yes, I believe that was one of the biggest things. Just join the gangs because that was the only way. I mean, if I start thinking about everything, I'm going to end in the mental hospital, because a lot of time when I was on my bed, those terrible nightmares, it was so bad. I used to scream, and sometimes I used to go and hit the wall with my head, and things like that really shook me up.
Meeting Nikki Cruz changed my own life. I've been working with gangs for months and not able to get through. And I went to Fort Greene Project, Nikki's turf, to hold a street rally. And unbeknownst to me, the Mau Mau's, Nikki's boys, had gathered to hear me preach. Some of them were making catcalls. I preached a simple message. And when I finally had nothing more to say, I waded into the crowd and tried to talk to them, but they weren't listening. They were looking over their shoulders to see the reaction of Nicky Cruz, almost as if to say, if it's all right with Nicky, it's all right with us. But one of the rival gang members of the Assassin Lord gang, in fact, turned to me and said, "Mister, if you can reach Nicky Cruz, you can reach anybody. You get him, he needs God. He's a killer." And they proceeded to tell me about his past. It was a horrifying experience for me. I went over to shake hands with Israel Narvez, his associate of the Mau Mau's, and he shook hands. He said, "You're okay, preacher, coming through." I went to shake hands with Nicky Cruz, and he slapped me and spit on me and said, "Go to hell." And it stung, it hurt. But I could see in Nicky's eyes something that I hadn't experienced much before. It was a well of loneliness, and yet there was a hunger, a need for love. And so I decided then, looking into Nicky's eyes, that I would hold a crusade for gangs at St. Nicholas Arena in New York City and invite Nicky and the Mau Mau's to come.
I felt a keen anticipation as Nicky and I walked towards the arena. This is where Nicky's life had changed direction. This is where the miracle happened.
Art, I experienced the greatest moment of my life right here in this place.
What a night that must have been, Nicky. Surrounded by your friends, and what a congregation. Zip guns, baseball bats, switchblades. I've been to a lot of evangelist meetings with my dad, but never one like that. How many members of your gangs were there?
We had 75 boys from my gangs. We walked in, I remember that day, there was a tense attitude. A lot of people was afraid and they was scared. And we was expecting a rumble, a street fight. There was about 10 different gangs. And I remember we walked in and we sit down right in the front. And then Wilkerson came in, Dave Wilkerson. He was so skinny and he was a little scared because there was too many people and there was a lot of gangs there. And when Dave Wilkerson began to preach, he began to preach about violence. In few words, he began to come into our level and try to portray a picture of how Jesus Christ was crucified in a violent way. Then he changed the subject and he began to preach about love. He said, you Puerto Rican learn how to love the Italians, and you Italian learn how to love the Puerto Rican. And I remember that when he began to talk about the power of love, I began to understand that this guy has something different that I have. Now, I was getting a little nervous and restless because how you feel, I never went to a church in my entire life. This was my first time I went into a religious service. I was a gang leader. I led my gangs to all kinds of rumbles, all kinds of fights, all kinds of blood, and now I'm sitting there and this skinny preacher is challenging me about that Jesus Christ can change my life. Then something happened. Some of my boys, they began to react. Some of them began to cry. Then Wilkerson, he looked at me and he told me right there, he told me, Nicky, God is speaking to you. I stood up and I told him, look, man, I don't believe that this can happen in my life. I can see myself changing my weapon for a Bible and walk down my neighborhood and everybody gonna say, hey, man, Nicky's an angel, he's a saint. But I remember that he told me, Nicky, if you let me pray for you, I tell you one thing, I believe that God can change your life. So then Israel told me, Nicky, let this guy pray for you. Maybe there's something different can happen to our lives tonight. So I looked to my gangs and I told them, how many of you want to go for prayer? 25 boys stood up and then we began to walk down to the dressing room. Dave Wilkerson was there waiting for us. Then he walked toward me and I had my arm like this. He told me, now Nicky, let me pray for you. So I said, go ahead, come in. You told me that God can change me, go ahead. He told me, but Nicky, close your eyes. If you don't close your eyes, I'm not going to pray for you. And I told him, I'm not going to close my eyes because I close my eyes. Why somebody hit me with a baseball bat and that's the end of Nicky? But then he didn't care. Dave Wilkerson put his hands up on my head. I got my eyes wide open and he began to pray. And for my first time in my life, I began to feel some different vibration from Dave Wilkerson's prayer. As I looked at Israel, he put his arm around me. He told me, Nicky, this is for real. God really is here. So I told Israel, man, are you kidding? This is the truth? He said, yes, God is real. So slowly I put my head down and I began to look at the floor. And then little by little I began to close my eyes. And when I closed my eyes, my mind began to flash back into a painful memory. And then little by little silent tears began to come down from my eyes. I feel bad about everything that I did. I feel so terrible. I was naked in the eyes of the Lord. Like he knew every spot of my life. He knew my problems, my hang-ups, all the disillusion, the despair of my life. And right there, I opened my lips, my mouth, and I asked God to come into my life. And with tears of repentance, tears of bitterness, I told Jesus, please help me. And there, Jesus changed me. And for my first time, I feel so good. It's hard for me to describe this feeling. I cap out to something that for many years I want to cap out. I began to feel like a big burden, a heavy burden was taken away from my heart, because for 11 years I never cried. And there, I began to feel the most beautiful feeling in my life. I was free.
Day begins, trouble's gone away. Can't remember how it was. I used to worry almost every day, but something's made me higher than all those words I can say. So take my hand, and I will tell you about your life and so much more. 'Cause Jesus made me higher than I've ever been before. I can love and know it's from within. No need to hide anymore. Listen, my brothers, we can now begin to love one another like we never have before. So take my hand, and I will tell you about love and so much more. 'Cause Jesus made me higher than I've ever been before. He's made me higher. Oh, he's made me higher. Don't you know he's made me higher? He's made me higher.
I've heard people say that such a dramatic change in a man's life from just one preaching service is an impossibility. And if that's all it was, I might have to agree. But I knew from Nicky's testimony that during that gang rally, he had met God. God had performed a spiritual transplant in Nicky, replacing a heart full of hate with a heart full of love.
Nicky, after you were converted in the arena, you went back to your miserable, lonely room. How did you feel?
I felt free, beautiful. I felt like I was a new person.
Were you able to go to sleep?
In the beginning, it was hard, but then I prayed in my heart, and I slept like a little baby.
Did you know how to pray?
No, I didn't know. I just say, "Dear Jesus, protect me," and good night.
And what about your pistol?
Well, you know something, for my first time I went to bed without thinking that I had to have my gun and shot somebody or something like that for protection. I went to sleep. I really went to sleep.
Of course, you were confused and bewildered by this incredible turnaround in your life, but not as confused and bewildered as the police lieutenant the next day.
Oh, yes, that was a different story. My boys came from that way, then we took the weapons, and we went right straight to the housing police.
How many of there were you?
We was about 25.
And you were holding your guns and knives?
Yeah, we have in one hand the Bible and the other the guns.
Oh, boy, I can imagine the look on that police sergeant's face when you walked into the precinct station with guns and Bibles. What'd they think was happening?
They thought that was a riot, but that wasn't a riot.
I would have thought it was an ambush. You hand a guy a Bible and then hit him on the head with a pistol.
No, we was nice that day, the first time in history.
And you laid your guns and stuff down right there in the police station?
Right there, we give it to the police, and I told the sergeant to find my Bible.
They must have thought history was made that day.
I think it was a beautiful day.
I suppose that some stories might end at this point. Nicky Cruz, the most vicious individual Fort Greene had seen in many years, had completely changed. He was a new man, but fortunately, conversion to Christianity offers more than just change. Christ offers the resources to live a new life. And many times, the very man that God lifts from the lowest depths is the man he chooses to be his special servant. When Nicky Cruz marched his Mau-Maus down St. Edward Street to turn in their arsenal here to the police, his march toward a new life had just begun.
I was in New York with Nicky Cruz. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd already retired, and I heard somebody praying. And I walked into the chapel, and Nicky Cruz was on his knees. In fact, he was on his face on the floor crying. He cried for 2 hours. When he got up, he grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "David, you're not the only preacher now. God's called me." I said, "Well, we better get you to Bible school." So we made arrangements for him to go to La Fuente Bible College. It was there God touched his life, and he met a beautiful girl, the name of Gloria. He called me about it. I was very excited, and I knew he was on his way.
Gloria, I know when you first met Nicky, it was at school, but what was your first impression of him at school, when you first saw him?
Well, I didn't think too much of it.
You didn't? Why not?
Well, it just didn't seem like that was the proper place for him. He didn't seem to fit in. He was always playing around.
What sort of things?
Oh, when the teacher would be very busy at the board, he'd shoot airplanes across the room. When we'd stand up, he'd pull the chair back and the girls would fall on the ground.
He sounds like a kid out of the ghetto.
Yeah, I guess he does.
Well, with that kind of a terrible start, how long passed before you had any idea there'd be a romance?
Oh, about 2 years later.
2 years?
2 whole years.
You had to overcome a lot, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Well, when Nicky finally popped the question, was he romantic, down on his knees, offering you the world?
No, it was just sort of matter-of-fact way. He had graduated school. He wanted to get married. He wanted to begin his ministry, his work, and
he needed a wife.
he needed a wife.
There you were.
And there I was.
Of course, he got romantic later.
Oh, yeah.
He must have. You have 3 children.
That's right.
Of course, before those children arrived, you two decided to go back to New York to go into the Teen Challenge work.
A month after we were married.
How long did you stay back there?
3 years.
And tell us a little bit about the work and the satisfactions of it.
Well, we had 3 wonderful years. They were full, and we really saw a lot of miracles and a lot of lives that were transformed and lives that were worthless picked up and just become very worthwhile.
I met one of those. You remember Cookie?
Yes, I sure do.
She was a drug addict, and just a few days ago, Nicky and I met her in New York, and she's a happy, well-adjusted person.
Yes, she is.
Cookie, you were never a part of Nicky's gang. You weren't on Mau Mau turf where we are now.
No, because I'm from Harlem. Spanish Harlem and Brooklyn were 2 different turfs at that time.
And you were hooked on heroin for 8 years?
Yes.
Less than 1 out of 10 ever get off heroin who ever get into it that deeply. How did you get started?
Well, you know, I was in the gang, and most of us, we smoked pot. And I started by smoking pot, and I was a pothead for about 2 years. And from there, you just sort of graduate to bigger kicks, you know, and I became a heroin addict.
Well, then how did you happen to meet Nicky and Teen Challenge?
Well, after I had been in heroin for 8 years, I was just, you know, I didn't have any place. I was living up in the Bronx, hanging around in the Bronx, and I went into a church because I needed money for a fix, and I thought a minister, I could con the minister out of some money. And instead of giving me money, he told me to wait, and he made a phone call. And the next thing I knew, I waited for about 45 minutes, and Nicky Cruz showed up with 2 girls counselors to pick me up and bring me to Teen Challenge.
And so you went in to con a minister for a fix, and you got Nicky,
Yeah.
who was a permanent fix, because he prayed with you and he turned you into Christianity,
Yeah.
didn't he?
Yeah, that's the thing that really moved me. I came to Teen Challenge, and I thought there's no hope. I had tried every method of cure. And when Nicky prayed for me, even though Christ or Christianity didn't mean anything to me, all I knew was that I needed help, and I was tired of living that life. And when Nicky started praying for me, what I most remember were the words, the expression, and the way he prayed. He cried, and that love really touched my life.
Nicky, she came in with her own child, didn't she, who was born while she was kicking the habit?
Yes, I remember her, and one of the things that I like her is that she was sincere, and she went a way out. And I remember when we prayed together, I saw something different came up on Cookie. And I tell you one thing, she got now 3 children, she's happy, a husband, and what else you can have out of it?
That's right. And you haven't been on heroin for how long?
Oh, almost 6 years.
So that's a cure.
She was really skinny when she came.
Yeah.
Now look how beautiful she looks.
Gloria, after your 3 years with Teen Challenge in New York, what was your next move?
Well, our next move was California. We wanted to come out here and begin our own work.
Where did you choose to go?
We chose Fresno because it's right in the center of California. We could reach young boys from the Los Angeles area and San Francisco.
Maybe because you could reach young people, you called it outreach for
Yes.
youth.
That's right, and that was our purpose, was to reach younger young boys that still weren't hardcore drug addicts.
Tell us what outreach for youth really is.
Well, first of all, it's a home. It's a real home for boys, and we like to get them when they're still young, that they can still be helped. And we get boys from all over the country, between 12 and 18, and some are referred to us by authorities, and others are brought in by their parents.
Outreach for Youth in Fresno, California, is Nicky's heartbeat. This is where Nicky feels at home, sharing his life with young boys who have been bound by the same fear and hate that once held him prisoner. In coming years, Nicky plans to have youth centers across the United States. Most of the boys with whom Nicky works are or have been drug addicts. Here at the center, someone cares and listens.
All these boys live at the center?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Where do they come from?
From every part of the country.
I'd like to meet a couple of them.
Sure, I want you to meet. Hey, Gary. He's from Houston.
Houston, Texas?
Oh, yes. And then, hey, Johnny. Over here.
Where's
He's
he
from
from?
New Jersey.
New Jersey?
Kirk. There's Kirk from Los Angeles. Hey, boys, I want you to meet Art Linkletter.
Hi, fellas. Say, John, let's start with you. How do you happen to come to the home?
Well, it was recommended to me by a minister back east when I was locked up. I was locked up for illegal use of heroin. And the Lord talked to me, and he said, told me I found out there was no way out except through him. So instead of going through any ordinary rehabilitation center, decided to fly out to Fresno to outreach for youth.
How long have you been there?
I've been there 2.5 weeks.
2.5 weeks?
Yes.
Now, what has it meant to you so far?
Well,
Has it been of real help?
Yes. Found happiness within myself. Got rid of all my hang-ups. Don't need, drugs anymore.
How did you come to the home, Gary?
Oh, my mom read me the book, I was getting pretty bad trouble, And I did some acid one night, and, I was going on a pretty bad trip, and I don't know why. I just started praying, and Jesus talked to me, and he told me to tell my mom, to wake her up. And I just kept on praying, and my trip only lasted 5 hours,
Was it a bummer?
Yeah, it was real bad. I was seeing all kinds of things, monsters, and, my face was burning when I looked in the mirror. And I tried to hide it under my pillow, when I went to bed, and it wouldn't go away. I don't even know why. I just started praying, and I thank Jesus that he came to me that night, and, he showed me where he was, where it's at, instead of doing drugs or in the streets.
Kirk, what were you doing? What were you on when you first met Nicky?
Well, when I first came to the center, I'd been through about 3 or 4 different state programs, and I was still strung on drugs. And my mother found out about the center from some people that she knew. And I came to the center, and I'd been strung on speed. And I came to the center, and Christ came into my life, and he completely changed me.
You were a speed freak?
Yeah.
What kind of runs did you have, a week at a time?
Well, I had about a 6-month run, but not really heavy, just on and off and things like that till I got healthy, and then I get back on.
How long were you at the center before they picked you to go on to do other things?
Well, I'd been there about 8 months, and I'd been there about 3 months, and I entered into Bible school.
And then?
And then, well, about 1.5 years later, after I got married, I came back to work as a counselor.
Good. Now what are you training to do?
Well, I'm planning on someday I want to run a center, for young people, to help young people find a reality in Jesus Christ.
What kind of training are you getting to do that?
Well, I'm going to college. I'm in my 3rd year of school now.
Great. And Nicky helped you through the whole thing?
Yeah, he did.
Thanks a lot. That was great, fellas. Okay, back to the game. And Nicky, wasn't that marvelous?
Oh, fantastic. I'm really proud of every one of those boys.
You should be.
Sure.
Incidentally, I saw a fellow over here watching the game that you talk about in your book, Israel, the boy who went to prison, who was the president of the Mau Mau's, who was a real loser, and now here he's with you.
He's doing beautiful.
Is that him?
Yeah, that.
Israel, come on over here. I'm Art Linkletter.
Glad to meet you, Mr. Linkletter.
I read about you in Run, Baby, Run, and I'm amazed to see you looking so well because you had it rough, didn't you?
Pretty rough.
And now you're married?
Yes.
Working in Fresno?
Yes.
Got a job and everything?
Yes. Oh,
And of course, the thing that makes this so dramatic, Nicky, is that about a few days ago in New York, I was talking to Blindman and Carlos and Cecil, all of them still back where you came from,
Yes.
all of them in trouble, all of them hopeless. How do you account for the fact that you got out of it?
Well, I thank Jesus Christ for that. It's pretty hard, you know, to get out of a ghetto, you know, just sort of say, well, I'm going to leave one of these days, and I'm not going to use drugs or hang around with the same crowd. I believe if you get away from the environment, you can make it.
How much did Nicky have to play in the part of you leaving the ghetto?
95%.
Isn't that great? You almost lost him, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a touchy moment because he saved my life once.
And then you saved his life.
And now I return the favor.
That's wonderful. And of course, Christ gets a little assist there too, doesn't he?
Oh, yes, sure. Christ is the one.
There is a unique side of Nicky Cruz, not visible at first meeting. I had walked with Nicky through the ghetto streets, and I'd come to deeply appreciate this humble young man who had been so dramatically transformed. I had seen how his life is influencing others on a person-to-person basis. But I had yet to meet the Nicky Cruz, who last year spent every weekend crisscrossing the United States, speaking to over 200,000 young people in youth crusades. This particular crusade brought him to Raleigh, North Carolina. As I saw the crowds of people begin to fill the auditorium, I realized I was about to meet Nicky Cruz, the evangelist.
After I slap him, after I spit him, after I curse him, after I put God down, then this man gonna tell me that Jesus loves me. He blew my mind. Then he told me, I don't care, Nicky, what you do. I'm not afraid of you. I know that you can grab a knife and you can kill me and cut me in 1,000 pieces. But remember, Nicky, those 1,000 pieces are going to cry out that Jesus loves you. And let me tell you something, young people. That was one of the greatest messages that I'd ever heard in my life. Nicky, Jesus loves you. Because the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, took over those 3 words, Jesus loves you. And for 2 weeks, I could sleep. And I tell you something, if you was in my shoes, you didn't know what to do with your life. I came so many times close to commit suicide and to kill myself because I couldn't cope no more with my guiltiness. I came many times close to death when I was beat like an animal in the street when 25 boys jumped me and then thought I was dead, but somehow God gave me a chance at least to live. And now my psychiatrist told me, Nicky, you're walking straight to the electric chair and hell, and nobody gonna stop you because I never met a boy so full of bitterness and hatred like you. And now this preacher said, no, Nicky, Jesus loves you. He cares. He wants you. He understands you hang up better than anybody. And right there I said, oh God, I had lost my mind. I had lost my identity. I don't know what is right and what is wrong. But this man said that you love me. I don't believe in nothing. But if this is the truth that you love me, I'm sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of running. I don't want to just live this life like this. Please help me. Please help me and just take my sins away. And if this is the truth, give me a new mind and a new heart. Let me tell you something. Jesus Christ was there. I thought that God was far away from human existence. He was just a prayer away from me. And that day I had the most fantastic experience that any human being can have. I met Jesus Christ not only as a Savior, but as the Lord of my life. And there I just give my whole life to Him. And Nikki Cruz no longer was the same. I changed. And if you want happiness, joy, and love, turn your life to Jesus Christ. Do what I did. There in front of many people, I give my whole life to Jesus. And for 11 years, I've been walking with Jesus Christ. He has been faithful, my best friend. I never walk alone. And I tell you, Jesus is beautiful. You don't have to take no more drugs. You don't have to hide no more in sex, in violence, in riot, in blood. But Jesus Christ will give you everything that you are looking for. Tap out to yourself, not to us or to me, But come up to Jesus Christ. Give Jesus Christ a chance, young people. Don't throw your life just like that. Don't be a follower. This is a generation without hero. Let me introduce to you a big hero. Jesus Christ will take your life today. And I promise you that when you walk out of this place, you will never will be the same. Shall we pray? Father, we thank you. We thank you in this afternoon for the power of Jesus Christ, thy Son, for the power of forgiveness. And there's no doubt, Jesus, that you are here. I pray that you move all over this place. Walk down the aisle, Jesus. And right there I found that young girl and that young man that is searching. And there, speak to them. Give us the backbone to say yes in this afternoon. Oh God, I pray that you fill this place with the beauty of your love. But your people are looking today for reality and the true meaning of love. Let Jesus be the thing. Now.
I have shared all my life with you. Though for me it's painful to go through. I hope, my friend, that you can see there's a change in me. I have a reason to be free. I have a reason to be
This has been some trip, Nicky, retracing your life from the depths of the New York ghettos to the beautiful coastline of California, meeting your friends and associates from the hopeless ex-Mau Maus to the young converts who are on their way back. But everybody wants to know now, what's next for Nicky Cruz? What's your future spell?
Art, there is a lot of hope for American youth. I want to give them the rest of my life. I believe a personal involvement will do a lot in this country. I know that we have a lot of problems, a lot of trouble, riots, crime, drugs, the sex explosion, teenagers running away from their home. There's so much I can do, but yet I'm one man. And I believe that there's one thing that I still have, and that is my life. And sharing this message of freedom through Jesus Christ will be my life.